A PETA investigation into wet markets in Asia that are still open shines a light on the suspected source of our global pandemic. Plus, an update on how PETAAsia rescued the animals from the Taal volcano in the Philippines. All next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil, Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. And by now you've heard about the dangers of the wet markets and how it is the leading suspect as to the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic. The truth is, wet markets, where animals from the wild are stored next to domestic animals before being sold live to consumers, they're dangerously unhygienic and ideal places for deadly viruses to jump species and spread. In April, weeks after the COVID-19 outbreak, PETAAsia had an investigator at live markets in Indonesia and Thailand, all similar to the one in China and still open. The pictures and video show blood and animal flesh as gloveless workers live kill meat and poultry for consumers before their eyes. There are live frogs and even cats, and the markets aren't much different from the ones in the U.S. PETA Senior VP Jason Baker of PETAAsia told me the threat from live markets here is just as real, not just from the live kill wet markets in ethnic communities, but also from all the factory farming operations in the U.S. Here's my interview with Jason Baker on the PETA Podcast. Where did your investigators go and what did they find?
Well, they went to Indonesia and to Thailand, and I think what they found was what you see over and over, and we've seen for decades, and we've been protesting and trying to change, and that is suffering animals inside of cages next to other suffering animals who are in filthy conditions, stressful conditions, pulled out, slaughtered in the most gruesome ways, and it's a day in and day out situation. We know that this is where SARS came from these wet markets that are all over Asia and moving into Africa. And we know that this is where COVID-19 came from. We were just simply documenting the suffering. And to me, it's a very basic science. Once people understand how it works, you have these suffering animals who, when they're stressed, their immune systems are lowered, and therefore they get diseases more often, and they spread diseases more often. And there's other animals around them who have other diseases that they wouldn't normally come in contact with. These other animals get them, they spread them, and they cross over to humans. And it's so basic, and it's something that we've been trying to shake people for. I think my first wet market protest was in 2003 when I lived in Hong Kong. And, some people are getting it slowly, but I thought after SARS that Hong Kong would see the light and would ban all live animal sales. But slowly, as things are forgotten, animals go back on sale in live markets. And so here we are, 17 years later, and we have all these various diseases that come from allowing animals to be so stressed, whether it's in live markets or factory farms. It's a similar situation where it's spreading diseases.
All right, but wait a minute, Jason. You know that this virus, the current virus, began, they suspect, in a Wuhan market in China. What makes you think, what makes you feel certain that the same sort of circumstances exist in Indonesia and in Thailand? How can you make that jump?
Well, I've seen them. I've been to so many markets in my lifetime. And it is, again, this simple science of these stressed animals who in the wild would not be around all of these other animals. There are different COVID viruses and other viruses that are naturally in other animals that don't normally spread to other species, and they live with them and they don't get sick. Part of it is when you put them in these stressful, filthy conditions in these wet markets around all these other species, including humans, you have a perfect mix for disease. And it's, this COVID-19 isn't the first, and it's not going to be the last. And we have been trying to to scream it from the hilltops.
But it's basically a question of hygiene then, right?
It's not just hygiene. I mean, there's also, it's related to stress, hygiene, having all of these animals who aren't normally around each other. It's sort of a mix, a melting pot of different problems. Mm-hmm. All of these problems shouldn't be happening. We should be leaving these animals in the wild. We shouldn't be eating any animals. We shouldn't be stressing the animals. These conditions at these wet markets should be better, should be cleaner.
Now, paint the picture. You had people undercover, or they weren't undercover.
Yeah, well,
they just went in and started taking pictures, right?
Yeah, I mean, the people in the markets know that if cameras are out, they get angry, and so it's sort of, you go in publicly, but it's undercover, and this. The Indonesia one, I think, is the most interesting because it was happening at the beginning of April when the parts of the world that weren't shut down were starting to shut down. So we were looking at flights over there for the investigator, couldn't find anything online, had to go to a travel agent who basically issued him a paper ticket. He had to go directly to the airport, fly in, hoping that at any moment, knowing that at any moment, the airports could all be closed down, landed, got the footage, tried to get some sleep, had 2 major earthquakes happen right then, had to get up at 3 a.m. to go get his flight, again, knowing that at any moment, all the airports in the country could be shut and he could be stranded for Lord knows how long. So just getting the footage had its own special drama. But yeah, then you walk in and you see, I mean, they're not as big as they were, but they're still big, and they're going to get bigger as people forget. So, and we know that. You walk in, and the first things you see are chickens next to dogs, next to cats, next to eels. There's cut up snakes, there's cooked rats, there's frogs and other reptiles, turtles. It's every suffering animal you can probably imagine. And I want to be clear, though, these wet markets are terrible, but factory farms are also terrible. They may not be as directly in your face, but they're also terrible. So we're not saying, factory farms are in some way better. The only maybe benefit we have is that animals who go to wet markets probably suffer longer. They don't get taken to the slaughterhouse right away. So they can be living for days or weeks longer, suffering in little cages, terrible conditions.
Your point is that a wet market, wherever it is, in Asia, in the United States, where there are dozens of wet markets in New York, in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, in Seattle, they're everywhere. They're everywhere in the United States. The wet markets are as bad as the factory farms, which are predominantly in the United States, right? Right.
I mean, factory farming is I guess prevalent everywhere. And yeah, they are. They're equally as bad. They are 2 different terrible things that we're trying to stop.
Right.
And I think that what we have with COVID-19 here is we have a direct relation to how animals and humans are being hurt from this disease, and from this virus. And so we have known for a long time that these wet markets, for if no other reason, human safety reasons, should be closed. But right. we want them closed for both animal and human safety reasons.
Right.
And so we're hoping that now that there's a light being shined on them, that serious actions will be taken. I watched SARS, and I've watched African flu and Ebola come through, and bird flu, and I've watched a whole bunch of them come through, and I see how governments quickly forget when the heat is off. This heat is a lot bigger than we've had before. So we're calling on the World Health Organization to really come out against wet markets and really push for their closures, because that is the best thing for humans and animals.
All right. So tell me, are the people in the countries you visited concerned about this at all? I mean, they know that the current crisis originated perhaps in the wet markets in Wuhan. You decided to look outside of China. First of all, why did you do that? And what is the concern of the people there in those other countries?
Well, people are concerned, but people also look at economics and how they're making money. So while these wet markets aren't as big as they were, they're still operating and they're still causing suffering, and they still have major health issues. And they're only going to go back to normal as things open up. And part of the restrictions is just with things closed down, the basic transports and situation and people getting out, so that they're smaller. So what we did was we wanted to just look and see what was going on. That was our first goal, was to see, are they functioning? Why are they functioning? And we saw very quickly that some are closed, but most are open. We have looked at China. China is slowly reopening their markets, and it scares me because they're taking small steps in it. At first, we thought this whole variety of animals were going to be banned from being sold, and slowly but surely, we're hearing about more and more animals that are being put back on the accepted list. Bear bile we thought might be gone, and it's not. There is discussion in China that maybe they won't be selling dogs for food anymore, but then we're hearing that maybe they will. So China's not out of it at all. China just went more restrictive. They closed everything for a while, all live animal markets, and they were closed. I mean, we were watching this since beginning of January. But now they're open. Now we see animal markets being open. We see live chickens being sold again in mainland China. So we're hopeful things will change. The Taiwan banned live chicken markets, I think, back in 2013. So live chickens aren't sold in Taiwan. So some regions of Asia are hearing the message and are reducing. They're not outright stopping, because you can still buy sea animals in live markets, but it's getting there.
The idea, though, if this current global pandemic started from Wuhan, you'd think that maybe there'd be some hesitation, or there'd be more of a reluctance on the part of consumers to even take part in live market situations. Is that possible? Is it so ingrained, the idea of going to the live market, that you can't stop this behavior?
For me, for years, for almost 2 decades now, I am surprised and shocked at people's ability to go back to these markets time and again after they have been closed for, even when we've had small diseases go through and have just wiped out the one market. They take the government's word for it and they're back. This is obviously different. I'm hoping that this is a time for real change in the world. I don't tend to think that's probably going to happen, just because I've watched time and time again how governments backpedal when people start forgetting, and they put economics over people's health time and time again. We will continue to push it. We will continue to educate. Veganism is on the rise across the world. There's no doubt. Yesterday, KFC in mainland China announced that they're coming out with a line of vegan products. Today in China, Starbucks announced a line of vegan products. So we see the change. There's no doubt that times are changing. And will they change fast enough before we have the next pandemic? I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith, to be honest. But we see the change. We see how today's young people don't think this is good. They see that it's wrong. They want it to change.
When you go to these countries, though, like Indonesia and Thailand, do you see people begin to talk about it? And is it, as you say, along generational lines, young people talking about it? Or are there people, throughout the society that are saying, hey, let's question whether we go back to the live markets, and let's consider veganism, and let's consider stopping the use of animals for food?
The difference in Asia between young and old is so dramatically different than it is in the West. There is such a huge difference because just the countries themselves have changed so dramatically over the last 30 and 40 years, just right. Dramatically. So today, young people do think it. I mean, when I go back to Thailand and I see all of these vegan options there that weren't there 10 years ago, much less 30 years ago, or when I see just everywhere, Hong Kong. I mean, I think someone told me that there were 89 vegan restaurants in Hong Kong now. When I see these changes in Hong Kong, or in mainland China, I've been campaigning in mainland China since 2002, and I see massive, massive change where nobody was vegetarian, and now so many celebrities that it's the talk of the food industry in mainland China. So yeah, I think it's very much live markets are being kept alive by an older generation. I think that there is pressures, and you see these different countries changing and reducing, and we have to push as hard as we can. And everyone should, right? The World Health Organization should push for locally, if there are wet markets or animal markets around you, push for them to be closed. It is happening. We just need to get it done a lot faster.
Well, what struck me by what you said in our interview here today is that you mentioned how KFC is coming out with a vegan line in China, how Starbucks is coming out with more vegan foods on its menus. The idea that it's not just a matter of taste, although that might be, that is a factor, but it's more this idea that the proprietors or these companies are seeing that they are meeting a demand and they are making money. And if they can make money off this, they're going to continue this, and you're going to see a generation kind of not shunning, but maybe pushing those fans of the live markets off to the corner. And we will see a dwindling number of them, just as, the society goes through this generational change. I mean, it could take longer, but do you think, is that a description of what's happening? The corporations are kind of leading it. It's kind of forcing, or not forcing it, but they're leading a generation that wants vegan products and forcing the live markets, toward oblivion.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is so many factors in here. There is just the overall economic development. There is the education of animal issues. There's educational ethics. Last year, we had 250 million video views in mainland China. PETA alone. 250 million video views talking about fur and veganism and all these different ethical issues. So like never before in mainland China and around Asia, we have a Facebook page in Vietnamese. We're heavily involved in Thailand. We do a lot of work in Japan. So all of these issues have been developing for 15 years. And so today's young people who are online and are watching our videos, there's a demand there. And it's interesting to watch because it's like people want this and it's not there. And then as more gets there, there's more demand, and it's going side by side, and businesses are paying attention to it. And it's, just someone who watched this in 2002 and thought, no young people care, and everyone's wearing fur, and to see it now where no one is wearing fur and everyone is talking about it, and it's a mainstream issue. It's exciting.
Jason, you say 2002. Doing the math, that's 18 years ago. That's almost a generation.
So when in 2002, when we started working in mainland China, celebrities who we would ask to do things like spay and neuter ads for us, very simple, everyone agrees with kind of ads, were concerned that they were anti-government because the issues had never been discussed. The anti-fur messages, the vegan messages, the circus messages, they had never been discussed in the mainstream before. And now they all are. The circus, no celebrities support circuses. After watching our investigations, there's just no one wears fur, and the Starbucks launch today had this music superstar who launched the vegan products, and they've got a Beyond Burger in there, and it's mainstream. I mean, this music superstar launched these products and for Starbucks, so it's not just some people calling for it anymore. It's mainstream.
All right, so let's go back over this video. The approach was expose the live markets, show that they exist, how deadly they can be, or how how susceptible they could be to disease, and essentially shame the governments, shame the market owners into shutting down or banning them?
It's really a government thing. It's pushing the World Health Organization to push countries. It's pushing countries directly. I myself, in the last 2 weeks, have written to the health ministers in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, a few, Indonesia, the Philippines. I've only heard back from someone, not the minister, in the Philippines who just acknowledged getting the letter. Other than that, we've not heard from anyone.
That's great, but is any of it going to have an effect on China's posture? Will China be moved to do anything because of, what you exposed in Malaysia or in Indonesia?
It is a group effort. We don't know where the next pandemic is going to come from. I went maybe 10 years ago now and watched them putting down all these pigs with Ebola in the Philippines, and they have had hazmat suits, and it was a huge swath of the country where they were killing every single pig that was alive. So this isn't the first time that there has been problems outside of China, and there will be more outside of China. So we're pushing China. We are educating. We're pushing the government. We're pushing consumers. We're pushing businesses. If we knew that only one way worked, we'd focus on that. But we tend to believe that you've got to push all the different buttons, and slowly you chip away at what people believe is safe, what people want, where people will go, and we're educating, we're pressuring. It's a mix, and this is one of those buttons.
Well, tell me, will China be influenced by these other countries? Yeah, I mean, just because you found instances in Indonesia and in Thailand, is that something that could have any impact at all on China?
It's not just about China. It's about the whole region. These are different buttons that we will push. We're also pushing in China. China has shut down much more tightly. China has not opened as much as Indonesia and Thailand and Cambodia and Vietnam are still open. China shut everything down, and while you may see stories of China's open and everyone's going to tourist places, their live animal markets are not. And so we're keeping an eye, and we have been, we were saying and yelling about them before, and we will continue to do that, and we will continue to educate the public on them so that less people are going. But as of right now, we aren't pointing a finger at specific live markets because they haven't reopened yet.
The cultural aspect of this, some people might say the wet markets are part of my culture. You're being somewhat racist by pointing out that this is a bad thing and that we shouldn't do that. Well, what do you say to those people who might want to use that as a defense?
Yeah, it's an excuse. It's not true. There are many people in Indonesia, Vietnam, China trying to shut these markets down. There are animal people trying to do it. There are health people trying to do it. We're not the only ones. And then I would also say that just times change. I myself have seen the reduction in live markets just in Metro Manila since I've been living there. I've watched the reduction in the availability of live chickens in Hong Kong when I was living there. And as I mentioned earlier, you see the reduction in Taiwan. They no longer sell live chickens. So I don't know how every single market has done in their reductions, but we see the changes overall. So that's just an excuse. It's if someone is saying that, most likely they have an economic interest, would be my guess, because it's just natural. Societies are building up. The live markets aren't really something that are economical. They take up a lot of space. They are dirty. They cause problems, and so we see them leaving. And I said that my concern is just that it could take 30 years before we see most of them go, and we'd like to see them gone next week.
And a lot of our listeners are in the United States, and there are live markets here in the United States in some places that you would never expect. I mean, New York, San Francisco, LA, of course, but they have live markets in Minnesota, live markets in the Midwest, generally.
Exactly. And open right now too.
Yeah. And so
that is the shock. Yeah.
What should people in the United States do about the idea of live markets? Do they still represent the same kind of threat even as the live markets in Asia?
They do represent the same kind of threat. They are still places where animals suffer, their immune systems are lowered, diseases are spread. It is still the same thing. The thing that people need to do is push the World Health Organization to change, and they need to push locally in their societies if there are live markets around them, and just demand that they be closed. There's no reason to keep them open in this day and age.
All right, Jason Baker, you head PETAAsia from the Philippines.
That's
and,
right.
While I have you, is the situation in Mount Taal, which we talked to you about a few months ago, has that been better, or has it?
We joked that it went from the dangerous place on Earth to the safest place on Earth because there's nobody on the island now. So we got the dogs off. Last I knew, there was a man on the island with 2 horses. He's old. He thinks tourists are going to come back. They're not. But he has a boat and 2 horses there. We at last count, we got off somewhere around 140 dogs from the island, 140 animals. The chickens, and we've had chickens, ducks, and horses that have all been rehomed, and some pigs. We are now down to somewhere around 40. I don't know the exact number, around 40 dogs still looking for homes. Many of them are in foster care. Some of them are at the vet, and with Metro Manila on lockdown, our staff have had to walk several miles each way to the vet every day to take the animals out. And the vet's closed, but we've got a key and to take them for walks. And we had two dogs today who went from Taal that went to Forever Homes. So we went from one crisis to another, and working on getting these animals in some nice homes. And if you go to the PETAAsia's Facebook page, people can scroll down and see some of these adoptions. They're pretty good.
Okay, but at least the volcanoes have stopped erupting in the Philippines.
Yeah, I mean, there's a worry that it could erupt at any time. I think it's gone down to I want to say out of 10, a level 6. That doesn't sound right, meaning it seems safe enough, but things could go the other way. Well, so that's where it is. They're supposed to be evacuating the shoreline area. How that's going right now, I don't know. Everyone's attention really has switched to COVID-19, and Taal is not in the press and not in the government's view. But we went through up until we couldn't get in anymore, until we couldn't move anymore. We went through and talked to every local, every regional leader, every basically neighborhood leader, every barangay, and gave them our contact info so that if there are any animal emergencies anywhere around the island or outside the island, that we're available to go help.
PETA Senior VP Jason Baker of PETAAsia on the wet markets, plus an update on the animals left homeless from the Taal volcano in the Philippines. You can go to PETA.org to see more of both and to see the latest on the wet market investigation, all the graphic photos. If you're so moved, text the word market, M-A-R-K-E-T, to 73822. That's the word market. Text it, market, M-A-R-K-E-T, to 73822, and urge the World Health Organization to call for an end to live animal markets. For more, go to PETA.org. And that's our program. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, or on ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog, or on my website, amok.com. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review the show. Remember, it helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music provided by CarbonWorks. Check them out on YouTube. Join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.